So, what really happens to our minds, to our souls, when our desires just run wild? It's a question that feels super modern, but we're about to dive into a 16th century text that tackles this exact problem head on. Let's just start with the biggest question of all. Can the very things you want, the things you crave the most, actually stop you from seeing reality clearly? Well, according to this text, the answer is a huge, unqualified yes. It's a phenomenon it calls the blindness of desire. All right, so let's get into the heart of it. Our source material zeroes in on the specific kind of damage that's caused by what it calls the appetites. And that damage? It's a kind of inner darkness, a spiritual blindness. Now, when we hear the word appetites, you might just think about food, right? But the text means something much bigger. We're talking about any unchecked desire, any strong emotional pull that starts to warp your judgment and literally change how you see the world. And the core argument is, well, it's pretty intense. It's not just that these appetites are a distraction. No, it's that they actively invite darkness and blindness into your very soul. They make it harder and harder to see what's true. And this isn't some new-fangled idea. The text points way back to ancient figures like David, who captured this feeling perfectly, this sense of being so boxed in by your own mistakes and desires that you literally can't see. Okay, so how does this actually work? How does desire blind us? The text gives us this really powerful metaphor to explain it. It says to think of your mind, your intellect, as a mirror. So on the one hand, you have a clear intellect. It's like a perfectly polished mirror, reflecting truth and shining with wisdom. But then, look what happens when those appetites take over. That same mirror gets all smudged and dark. It can't reflect anything clearly anymore. And this is really the core analogy. An intellect clouded by desire is like a dirty mirror or muddy water. You can lean over and try to see yourself, but the image that comes back is hazy, distorted. You can't trust it. That's what it's like trying to see the world through the lens of your own unchecked wants. And the text just keeps giving us these incredible images. It says this blindness is like thick vapor that makes the air impossible to see through. Or, get this, it's like a moth that wants light so badly it flies straight into the bonfire that destroys it. Or even fish, dazzled by a shiny lure that's actually a deadly trap. Every single time, desire leads directly to blindness. So it all boils down to this. If our own mind is blinded by our appetites, then what in the world is leading us? Well, according to the source, we're like a blind person being led around by, another blind person, our own desires. And you know exactly where that's headed. And here's the really scary part. This inner blindness doesn't just stay in one little corner of your soul. Oh no, the text says it sets off this devastating chain reaction that throws your entire inner world into total chaos. You can just see the dominoes falling here, can't you? It starts with the appetites clouding your intellect, your ability to think clearly. Then, that foggy thinking weakens your will, your power to make good choices. And finally, a weak will dulls your memory, your connection to past truths and experiences. It's a total system meltdown. And the spiritual consequences are just huge. Your will loses the strength to even want what's truly good. And your memory, which the text describes as this beautiful canvas for truth, gets so covered in mud that it can't hold a clear picture of anything worthwhile anymore. Okay, get ready for this, because this is where the text makes a claim that is honestly pretty radical. It basically says that if you don't deal with these appetites first, all your other spiritual efforts could be a complete and total waste of time. Just look at the comparison here. On the one side, you have someone spending years on all these intense spiritual exercises and getting almost nothing out of it. It's like they're planting seeds on concrete. But on the other side, just 1 month spent weeding out those desires is more fruitful. The text is saying the prep work is everything. And why is that? Well, it's simple. Trying to grow spiritually without clearing out your desires first is like being a farmer who just throws seeds on hard, weedy, untilled ground. It doesn't matter how good the seeds are, nothing is going to grow. You have to do the hard work of preparing the soil first. And if you need a real-world example of this, the text gives us the ultimate cautionary tale, the story of King Solomon, who was supposedly the wisest man who ever lived. Just watch this tragic progression. Solomon starts at the absolute peak, with this incredible gift of wisdom. But then he makes a fateful choice. He decides to just give his heart whatever it wants. And from there, It's this slow, terrible decline, as his desires blind his famous intellect. He gets lazy, starts building idols, and eventually, that brilliant light of wisdom is just gone. And here it is, in his own words, the exact root of his downfall. It wasn't some complex philosophical error. It was a simple policy. If my heart wants it, it gets it. And that, right there, was the beginning of the end for his wisdom. And this leaves us with a really chilling question, doesn't it? The text basically asks, look, if this could happen to Solomon, the wisest of the wise, what in the world do you think is going to happen to the rest of us if we're not paying attention? This is the end game. This is where it all leads, a state of total and utter confusion, described by the prophet Isaiah. You get so turned around that you start calling evil good and good evil. You're absolutely convinced you're walking in bright daylight, when in reality you're stumbling around in pitch black darkness. And that's the haunting question this text leaves us with. If our own desires have the power to completely flip our world upside down, if they can so totally warp our perception, how can any of us ever be really sure that we're seeing things clearly?